Are you confused about how local variables and object variables work in AWS Java Lambda? You're not alone. Today, we're diving into a common question that many developers face. I totally get it. It can be really frustrating when you're trying to understand how your code behaves, especially in a cloud environment like AWS. You're not the only one who's puzzled by this. Here's the specific question we're addressing today. One user asked about storing order ID and store ID in field variables within their AWS Lambda function. They were concerned about whether AWS caches these variables or creates a new Java object for each request. Sound familiar? Let's explore this together. So what's the deal with AWS Lambda and variable storage? When your Lambda function is invoked, AWS creates a new execution environment. This means that if your function is invoked multiple times, it may reuse the same environment, which can lead to caching of field variables. But don't worry, we'll break it down step by step. And stick around. At the end of this video, I'll share a crucial tip that can help you manage your variables effectively in AWS Lambda. To address the user's concern about variable storage in AWS Lambda, we first need to clarify how AWS Lambda manages its execution environment. Each time a Lambda function is invoked, it runs in a new execution context unless it is reused. Next, the user should consider the implications of storing values like order ID and store ID in field variables. If the execution context is reused, these variables will retain their values across invocations, which could lead to unexpected behavior. To avoid issues, it is generally recommended to use local variables within the method scope. This ensures that each invocation of the function has its own separate instance of these variables. Finally, the user can implement this change by modifying the validate method to declare order ID and store ID as local variables. This way, they will be created anew with each function call. Fun fact: AWS Lambda can scale automatically to handle thousands of requests simultaneously. Just imagine the power of that. But with great power comes great responsibility, like managing your variables wisely. Now let's look at the answers provided by other users. This user strongly advises against using instance variables in AWS Lambda functions. They explain that multiple invocations can share the same Lambda instance, which could lead to unexpected behavior. Instead, they recommend keeping instance variable writes to a minimum, ideally limiting them to initialization only to ensure thread safety. But here's the tip I promised. Always initialize your field variables in the constructor of your Lambda function. This way, you can ensure that they are reset for each new execution environment. And there you have it. Understanding local versus field variables in AWS Lambda can make a big difference in your code's reliability. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe for more insights, and remember to keep experimenting with your code.